everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our Fossil Friday web chats brought to you by the Western Science Center and the Raymond M. Alf Museum of Paleontology. I'm Brittany Stoneberg. I'm the Outreach and Communications Coordinator for the Western Science Center, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Gabriel Santos.
Hi, everybody.
And I can see he's got another great outfit for this week. He's the Collections Manager for the Raymond M. Alf Museum. And today, our guest is Evan Johnson-Ransom. So, welcome, Evan.
Hey.
Hey. I think everybody's really excited for your talk because we're going to be doing Tyrannosaurs today, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are.
I love props. Awesome. So, as always, I'm going to go ahead and give you a little background on Evan, our guest today. And when he's ready to give his talk, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will answer as many as we are able after his talk. So Evan has always wanted to be a paleontologist, and he is currently a master's student studying under Dr. Eric Snively at Oklahoma State University's Center for Health Sciences. He fueled his passion for paleontology by watching lots of dinosaur documentaries, such as Jurassic Park and Land Before Time movies, in addition to visiting museums. And as an undergraduate, he studied under Dr. Kenshu Shimada at DePaul University. And he's presented at plenty of different conferences. He's been a volunteer docent for the Field Museum of Natural History, and he's been on days with the Bighorn Basin Paleontological Institute. So we're very excited to hear you talk today, Evan.
Thank you. All right, so let me share my screen.
Alrighty.
Okay. Okay. Can everybody see the screen?
Not yet. 1 second.
Okay.
Why is this not working now? All right, try it now, Evan.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So, there we go. All right. Thank you for the introduction, Gabe and Brittany. Hello, everyone. My name is Evan, and today we are going to be talking about Tyrannosaurs. And here we get to see how small ankle-biting carnivores such as D-Long and Guanlong evolved into car-crushing monsters such as T-Rex. Also, I would like to give a shout out to paleo artist Julius Chitney for making this wonderful artwork depicting the various members of the Tyrannosaurs. So, a little bit about myself. I am currently a master's student at Oklahoma State University Center for Health Sciences. I got my bachelor's at DePaul University, where I studied under Dr. Kinshu Shimada, and I majored in biological sciences, concentrating in evolution and ecology. And usually, when I'm not doing paleo, I'm either just being a nerd. This includes drawing, writing, playing Pokemon and Yu Gi Oh!, as well as doing voice impressions of characters from various shows and movies. Here you have me posing alongside legendary Godzilla at the 2019 Chicago Comic and Entertainment Expo, or C2E2. So here, let me talk about my path to being a paleontologist. Ever since I was 2 years old, I have always wanted to be a paleontologist. And plus, I would also like to thank my mom and grandma for having helped fuel my passion. So during my preschool days, I would routinely bring to show and tell dinosaur toys and also dinosaur books to show up to the class, as well as to read and play with respectively. In addition to this, I would also routinely visit museums and theme parks such as Jurassic Parks, such as the Universal Studios Jurassic Park The Ride. Here you see me posing behind a Stegosaurus. And in high school, I became a docent for the Field Museum's Evolving Planet exhibit. There, I also got to work for the museum's geology department, where I got to weigh and identify meteorite specimens. And in college, I continued to be a docent, except this time I got to talk about the museum's crown jewel, Sue the T Rex. It was also at this point where I started to learn more about Tyrannosaur paleontology. So, some of you are probably wondering what is my research. I'm interested in studying the feeding behavior in dinosaurs, specifically theropods. And my favorite theropod group to study are tyrannosaurs. Jaws are an important feature in animals as they allow them to open and close their mouths, as well as acting as a feeding apparatus. So you could imagine them to grab onto and swallow anything that they may sink their teeth into. Cool, huh? In addition, I'm also a huge Tyrannosaur nerd. So whenever I visit any museum, I'm always in awe at any Tyrannosaur skeleton that I come across, as these are usually Tyrannosaurs that I only read about in books and papers or only saw in documentaries. So here you have me posing with Guanlong at the Shanghai Museum of Natural History in China, where I visited in July 2019. Guanlong is an important dinosaur as it was one of the oldest known tyrannosaurs. In March of 2018, I visited the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles, California, where I got to see the T-Rex growth series. There, I got to see how T-Rex grew up as a small predator to a large adult. For my birthday, December 2017, I visited the Dinosaur Discovery Museum where I got to see Stan the T-Rex, and this is probably one of my favorite T-Rex specimens. And following this, in October 2016, I visited the Natural History Museum in Salt Lake City, Utah, where I got to meet Lithronex, the Gore King, a rather impressive name for a tyrannosaur in 2016. So some of you are probably wondering, what is a tyrannosaur? A tyrannosaur is a theropod or meat-eating dinosaur. There were no herbivorous tyrannosaurs. And one thing I should mention is that tyrannosaurs have a very impressive geographic distribution range. I should mention that there is one theropod group called the Megaraptorans, as some paleontologists are unsure as to what theropod group those are, but some think they are tyrannosaurs. And if that's the case, then once again, it shows that tyrannosaurs have a very impressive geographic distribution range, as fossils have been found in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. The only two continents that they've not been found in were Africa and Antarctica. Feathers are a new feature in tyrannosaurs, as back in the day, they used to be thought of as just scaly. However, upon the discovery of Delong and Eutyrannus, these tyrannosaurs were preserved with feathers. It also begged the question as to whether other members of the tyrannosaurs were covered in feathers and in what possible capacity. And murderous figure skaters is a new term to describe tyrannosaurs in terms of their mobility, as new research finds that tyrannosaurs were very agile. They could turn at very fast speeds in contrast to other theropod dinosaurs, as well as other dinosaurs that they preyed on. In fact, there was also a recent paper that came out that showed that tyrannosaurs were efficient power walkers. So gone were the days where tyrannosaurs were seen as slow-moving, lumbering predators, but as rather quick and agile hunters, or murderous figure skaters. But let's talk about the most famous tyrannosaur of the group. You know it, you love it, or hate it, Tyrannosaurus rex, the tyrant lizard king. Weighing in at 9 tons and measuring 40 feet in length, T-Rex was the apex predator of its environment. In addition, fossils of Tyrannosaurus have been found in North America, ranging from Canada to Texas. In addition to this, T-Rex lived alongside and preyed on a number of dinosaurs, such as the horned-faced ceratopsian dinosaurs such as Triceratops, the duck-billed hadrosaurs, the armored club-tailed ankylosaurs, as well as the giant long-necked sauropod dinosaurs. And presented here is an image from the virtual tour Dinosaurs in the Wild, where you have an adult T-Rex standing on top of a dead ankylosaurus. Also, this is probably one of my favorite depictions of T-Rex. And so one thing that I've always been fascinated with was Tyrannosaur feeding or T-Rex feeding, because T-Rex lived alongside a variety of different dinosaurs. And we always find bones both of Triceratops or the duck-billed dinosaurs with bite marks attributed to T-Rex. But have you ever wondered how much force an adult T-Rex could generate with its powerful jaws? Because in the movie Jurassic Park, you saw a T-Rex crush a Ford Explorer with its mighty jaws. And usually, paleontologists have found that an adult T-Rex could generate a bite force of 8,000 to 12,000 pounds of feeding. That's like being crushed by a monster truck. Or in a biological context, it had the ability to crush bone. It's the nickname, the bone crusher. You would not want to be at the receiving end of those chompers. Okay, I'm gonna put the T-Rex skull down for a minute. But it kind of begs the question though. We know a lot about the feeding behavior in T-Rex, but what about other tyrannosaurs? As they kind of present a rather unique evolutionary scenario. As here we have Guanlong, the same tyrannosaur from the Shanghai Museum of Natural History. Guanlong and its kin were very small, in contrast to other dinosaurs that it lived alongside. But over time, Guanlong and its kin began to diversify into large behemoths like T-Rex. And who's to say that their skulls and jaw muscles evolved in congruence with their newly acquired girth? And so here I'm going to be using the following methods: muscle force reconstruction and finite element analysis. So let's start off with the muscle force reconstruction. So I'm going to be using a number of different Tyrannosaur skulls, and I'll be reconstructing jaw muscles that would have been present in the back of the skull, on top of the cranium, as well as on the inside. And in doing so, I can actually create an accurate bite force by measuring the amount of force generated by each individual jaw muscle. Plus, you can expect some really cool 3D models too that are animated. And here's something else that I'm going to be using too, the finite element analysis. This is going to be important as it's going to be testing the durability of Tyrannosaur skulls as they're feeding. So finite element analysis is usually used in construction to test the sturdiness and durability of construction materials such as steel girders and bridges. Now, in the case of paleontology, I'm going to be supplying very high forces to the skulls of different tyrannosaurs and to see how well they respond to certain stresses, whether it's low stress and high stress. Here we have an adult T-Rex, and in the adult T-Rex, you can see high stress located in the back of the jaw, which is indicated in red. Red is going to be an indicator for high stress, whereas blue, that is going to be an indicator for low stress, and we'll talk about this in a bit. So you could probably expect this to be more like a giant trophy wall, where you have Tyrannosaur skulls of various sizes, as well as coming from different time periods. And you basically get to see the different jaw muscle reconstructions, as well as the finite element analysis. I should also mention that the colors associated with these Tyrannosaur skulls are not related to finite element analysis. Rather, these are to act as labelings for the different Tyrannosaur skulls. So now that we know the methods, how about we introduce the key players for the study? So if I'm referring to all Tyrannosaurs, then the clade name is Tyrannosauroidea. Tyrannosauroidea includes all Tyrannosaurs that are basal or very old, as well as Tyrannosaurs that are more derived or advanced, thinking of them as later Tyrannosaurs. And if we're talking about later Tyrannosaurs, then the name for those is Tyrannosauridae. In addition, I'm going to be working with 5 different Tyrannosaur groups. These are the Proceratosauridae, the unresolved Tyrannosauroids, Albertosaurinae, Aleoramaenae, and Tyrannosaurinae. Fortunately, I get to talk about each of these individual groups. So let's start off with the first Tyrannosaur group, the Proceratosauridae. These were basically the first tyrannosaurs, or probably more basal tyrannosaurs, as fossils of these dinosaurs belong to the middle to early Cretaceous of Asia and Europe. Also, I'd like to mention that the Proceratosaurids are probably my favorite tyrannosaur group, just given how unique their appearance is, as here we have Guanlong. Guanlong had a rather unique crest on its head that is shared by all Proceratosaurids that would have been used for display or for recognition, in addition to having long three-fingered arms that would have been used for grasping prey, in contrast to the tiny little nubs that you'll see in other Tyrannosaurs like T-Rex and Albertosaurus. This is my best T-Rex arm impression. Scary, isn't it? But one other thing I should mention is that Proceratosaurids like Guanlong, they weren't all small. Guanlong only measured 9 feet in length, whereas you had other Proceratosaurs that were rather big or gigantic, like Eutyrannus, a large feathered tyrannosaur that measured 30 feet in length from the early Cretaceous of China. And so, following the Proceratosaurids, we now have the unresolved Tyrannosaurs. And so, the reason why they're called unresolved Tyrannosaurs is because phylogenetically, they don't belong to a specific group. They're neither Proceratosaurids nor are they Tyrannosaurids. But I will say that the unresolved Tyrannosaurs, given how unique they are, they're found to be more advanced than the Proceratosaurids, but still very basal, or they're very old. And like the Proceratosaurids, they came in a variety of sizes. Here you have Dilong, a small feathered tyrannosaur that measured 6 feet in length from China, versus Susky a 16-foot-long tyrannosaur from North America. Fossils of the unresolved tyrannosaurs have been found dating to the early to mid-Cretaceous in Asia, Europe, and North America. I should also mention that the unresolved tyrannosaurs had features that would be present in later tyrannosaurs, such as the ability to turn at faster speeds, as in the case of Susky. So now we start getting to larger tyrannosaurs, except these tyrannosaurs are built for speed. These are the Albertosaurinae, and fossils of these dinosaurs have been found in the late Cretaceous of North America, specifically Canada. And there are only two members. These are Gorgosaurus and Albertosaurus. Some paleontologists tend to lump Albertosaurus in with Gorgosaurus as they think they're basically one and the same. However, some paleontologists think they're actually two different dinosaurs altogether. But here you start to see the transition from the small bodied tyrannosaurs like Guanlong and Dilong to something that's bigger, as you have the long muscular tail that would have acted for balance, the tiny arms, a large head with rows of sharp teeth, and long legs too. Next up, we have the Alioraminae, and like the Albertosaurinae, there are only two members, Alioramus and Kianchaosaurus, or Pinocchio Rex. And fossils of these dinosaurs have been found in Asia dating back to the late Cretaceous. Alioramus is a rather interesting tyrannosaur, as a number of paleontologists thought that this was a juvenile given its small stature, its slender snout, as well as its relatively long legs. However, upon the discovery of Kianchaosaurus, it turns out that there was enough evidence to warrant Alioramus not only as its own unique dinosaur, but also the creation of the group Alioraminae. And one thing I should also mention about the skulls of Alioraminae is, of course, of how slender they are, which we'll talk about in a bit. But the skulls of Alioramus and Kianchaosaurus are slender in contrast to the more deep-snouted and robust tyrannosaurs like T-Rex. Very thin and slender versus very deep and robust. And so now we get to the last member of the group, Tyrannosaurinae. And these were the last tyrannosaurs, and they were also the biggest too. Fossils of these tyrannosaurs date back to the late Cretaceous of Asia and North America, and they were also the apex predators of their environment with their massive size as well as having huge banana-shaped teeth that were used for crushing. Here we have T-Rex, or Tyrannosaurus, the most famous tyrannosaur of the group from North America that measured 40 feet in length, as well as Tarbosaurus, a tyrannosaur from Mongolia that measured up to 39 feet in length. Some paleontologists think that T-Rex was actually an immigrant from Asia, but that's still debatable, however. And so here we get to see the finite element analysis in action. So here we have an adult T-Rex, the nation's T-Rex from the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C., and a juvenile T-Rex, Jane, from the Burpee Museum of Natural History in Rockford, Illinois. So let's take a look at the adult T-Rex. So here we supplied an adult T-Rex with very high forces. And as indicated in red, red is an indicator for very high stress, and it's the only indicator present in the adult T-Rex. Here you see more low stress, however. This shows that an adult T-Rex was capable of not only exerting very high bite forces, but its skull was basically robust. It was a shock absorber. It could handle high forces when biting. The opposite can be true for a juvenile T-Rex. While there is areas of low stress occurring in the skull, there is a lot of high stress, however. The high stress can be present in the intermediate teeth, the bottom of the skull, as well as in the top, too. T-Rex underwent a very interesting growth spurt. So here, a juvenile T-Rex would have had a very slender snout. It probably couldn't really handle, it probably wasn't capable of bone crushing as the case in an adult, so it probably would have hunted smaller prey. But over time, as a juvenile T-Rex got bigger, its skull went from being slender to more deep and robust, so it could probably handle powerful biting and could handle higher forces. And one other thing I should mention is that a juvenile T-Rex, its skull is very similar to that of an Alioramus, just given how slender it is. And who's to say that Tyrannosaurs such as Guanlong and Alioramus and Kianchosaurus would probably show very high stress when subjected to finite element analysis, given how slender their skulls are, and they probably couldn't really crush bone in the case of an adult T-Rex or other tyrannosaurs that had deep and robust skulls as seen in Tarbosaurus and Albertosaurus. But at the moment, this is just a hypothesis. We need more tyrannosaur skulls to work with. Or, to quote Gray from Jurassic World, we need more tyrannosaur skulls with teeth. So, thank you, and I'm open to any questions. Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we're back.
Thank you so much, Evan. And sorry, everyone, for my previous audio issues. Hope we've corrected that. So thank you so much, Evan. That was really informative.
Thanks.
Alrighty.
There's a lot more Tyrannosaurs than I thought there were.
Yeah, there's a lot of Tyrannosaurs to work with, actually. Ironically, we found probably more than 50 T-Rex specimens, but there are a number of Tyrannosaur specimens that we can work with, and some are very old and basic, too. Like, I would really love to work on the bite force mechanics in Tyrannosaurs like Tyrannosaurus because it's so basal, yet it's also a very large Tyrannosaur, too, not to mention Guanlong as well.
That's so cool. So you ready to take some questions from the audience?
Sure.
Alrighty.
All right, cool.
Okay. Here's a question. This is from Ada, or Ada. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. Were there any top predators that lived alongside T-Rex?
Any top predators that lived alongside T-Rex? No, T-Rex was the largest predator of its environment. The only dinosaur that T-Rex had to fear as an adult was another T-Rex. Now, if this was the case of a juvenile T-Rex, it basically would fear just about any dinosaur that wanted to eat it, whether it was like, say, smaller dinosaurs, pterosaurs, or even crocodilians.
All right. Another good question. This is from our viewer Diana. So, how do you feel about the nomenclature slash taxonomy of Gorgosaurus? Do you think it should be sunk with Albertosaurus?
That's a good question. I'm not too sure on that one because the thing is that if you take a look at like an Albertosaurus and Gorgosaurus, they kind of look similar, but at the moment there's some paleontologists that are able to find differences between the two. I'm not really that good with taxonomy, however, but at the same time, if they're posting as different dinosaurs, then that's cool. But if they're both lumped in together, then that's even cooler too. Because Gorgosaurus is a really cool name. It means Gorgon lizard.
I did love the mention of Lithonax. That's always been, aside from the Tyrannosaur specimen that's at the Western Science Center, Dynamo Terror, Lithonax has been one of my favorite dinosaur names because the Gore King just sounds really cool.
Oh yeah, like
I love the way we name things in paleontology. Sometimes they come from Greek mythology, sometimes they come from pop culture. It's just the way that we name things is just so cool because it's one of the few places we can really be imaginative, I guess, when it comes to our, well, more artistically imaginative when it comes to our science.
Yeah. Okay. Here's another good question. This is from Elias. How do you feel about giant carnivorous theropods roaring in movies?
So back in Jurassic Park, T-Rex was shown being able to roar like a lion. However, current research now finds that Tyrannosaurs, which are archosaurs, a group that includes birds and crocodilians, they would have been incapable of roaring. Instead, they would have made like very deep guttural cooing sounds, so kind of like what you see in a bird or in a crocodile, as they can use closed mouth vocalization. So think of it like say a very guttural quack sound, like, but not like say quack quack, or like, or actually,
I think that might be even more terrifying than the roaring.
Oh, totally. You hear that like off in the distance at night,
oh yeah.
just run right away.
Yep.
And something else is that like T-Rex could also probably have used closed mouth vocalization, so you could probably hear the vibrations too and feel it.
It's terrifying.
Just like in Jurassic Park, right?
Alrighty. This is from our friend Ashley. Have you had the chance to personally find Tyrannosaur fossils?
Unfortunately, no, but one day I will.
I think we all have our particular things that we would love to find.
Definitely. I want to find actually, you know what? I was going to say like a really nice Desmostillion, but honestly, if I had the chance to find something, I want to find like something super hella weird, like a giant kiwi bird or something, I don't know. Just something weird.
I personally, despite all the time that I spend talking about mastodons like this one, have never actually gotten the opportunity to dig up a mastodon or another proboscidean like a Gomphothea or mammoth. I would love that. That's kind of my end all be all in terms of field work. I just want to dig up an elephant.
Nice.
Alrighty. Here's a good question from Ines, who's one of our viewers from Germany. Hi, Ines. Do birds belong to the same taxon? If so, how are they related? And can you draw conclusions for feeding behavior from today's birds?
So, can you repeat that question one more time?
Yeah, of course. So, do birds belong to the same taxon as tyrannosaurs? And if so, how are they related? Then there was another question on top of that, was just wondering if you could draw the same conclusions about feeding behavior from today's birds, from what you're learning about tyrannosaurs.
So, phylogenetically, birds are dinosaurs. So, if you take a look at a T-Rex and compare it with a chicken, you'll notice a couple of similarities. For one thing, both a T-Rex and a chicken have 3-finger toes, or digits. Not to mention, they also have a furcula, or a wishbone. Also, their bones are hollow. So, birds and dinosaurs have hollow bones. Now, in terms of feeding behavior, birds don't have teeth, so but dinosaurs do, however. So we actually have to take a look at a couple of inferences on what their feeding behavior would have been like. So if I had to imagine a T-Rex feeding, it probably would have been more like a crocodile, probably biting into its prey and taking gulps of flesh too. Whereas a bird, birds don't really have teeth. They have an organ called a gizzard, and inside are stomach stones, which are used to break down any food that they come across.
Cool.
I'm just like trying to imagine now
Yeah.
a bird just tearing huge chunks of meat out. Actually, it's kind of like a vulture, but not as cool, I guess.
I mean,
really,
personally, if I had to pick a favorite bird, vultures are pretty up there for me. So I think it's just as cool, but that's just me because I have a weird affection for vultures.
Same. Probably my favorite vulture would probably have to be the bearded vulture, just given how unique its feeding is. Because a bearded vulture, it basically will just come across any prey and it'll just grab like a bone, and it will drop it off at a very high altitude, and the bone will split open. And in doing so, the bearded vulture will swallow the bone whole.
Bearded vultures are one of my favorite animals. The lammergeier, they look like what we think of mentally as a dinosaur. I love them to death.
Yep.
Okay, here's another good question. This is from Andrew. So did Tyrannosaurs outcompete, I'm going to mispronounce this, I apologize, Carchodontosaurs, or whatever other large theropods? Or did they merely replace them in areas where they'd already gone extinct?
So Tyrannosaurs actually came a lot later after the Carchodontosaurs. So in the early Cretaceous, there was this large Allosaurus-like theropod called Ceots, and living alongside it were very small Tyrannosaurs. Now, we're not sure what happened over time, but around the early to mid-Cretaceous, the Allosaurids disappeared in North America, but they became more abundant in South America and Africa. So you basically had like this big empty vacuum of who should be the next top predator, which the Tyrannosaurs were able to exploit and take over. So in a way, the Tyrannosaurs did not outcompete the Carchodontosaurs. Now, there is another group of dinosaurs that probably would have outcompeted the Carchodontosaurs called the Abelisaurs, which include dinosaurs like Carnotaurus from Disney's Dinosaur and even Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. You know, it's the one that had like the little horns on its head and also very tiny arms compared to T-Rex.
Those are so crazy looking weird. I love them so much.
Cool,
Okay. And this is one final question in our chat. This is from Shosh. Of the Tyrannosaurs mentioned, is there any note of how many possibly were cannibals?
How many were cannibals? That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure because yesterday there was a paper that came out that showed that Allosaurus had displayed cannibalistic feeding behavior. So in a way, you could say that all Tyrannosaurs were cannibals. It just depended on kind of, let's say, prey availability as well as like any items that they came across. So it's not really impossible to say that Tyrannosaurus was not a cannibal.
That's terrifying. I love it.
Can you imagine like if you like came across like if T-Rex were still around or any Tyrannosaur, you're just walking across, all of a sudden you see just one munching off another one, just like, okay, I'm going the other way.
If you needed to make a Tyrannosaur any more terrifying, there you go.
Yep.
I have a question for you, Evan.
Yep.
So, Tyrannosaurus Rex is probably one of the most famous dinosaurs ever because of, you know, Jurassic Park and a bunch of other media. What would you say, one, is your favorite depiction of Tyrannosaurus Rex, or whichever one, in pop culture? And if you could choose a dinosaur to show up in the next Jurassic Park, which one would that be?
That's a good question. So, does this have to be limited to just movies, or can it be video games?
Yeah, we can do video games.
Okay, because probably my favorite. So, I'm a huge sucker for feathered Tyrannosaurs. They really make it look very cool. They give it like a very lioness feel. So probably the original depiction by Saurian by R.J. Palmer, or also the one that was featured in Dinosaurs in the Wild. That was a really cool depiction of it. And as for a dinosaur that I would like to see in a new Jurassic World movie, that would be a tie between either Dinochirus or Therizinosaurus.
That's the second mention of Therizinosaurs. Dang it! That's the second mention of those dinosaurs this or today. In the last episode in the Animal Crossing episode, Dr. Andrew McDonald wished she could see one of those in the Animal Crossing Museum.
Yeah.
They're so weird too.
There definitely needs to be the paleontologists demand more Therizinosaur representation. Also, sorry, y'all. You might have noticed my background's changed. I just realized I had a much more appropriate background for this particular talk. So this is Dynamo Terror. This is a piece of paleo art by Brian Eng, friend of our museums. And I realized, well, if we were going to have a theropod talk, then I might as well have a theropod background. Except that no matter where I am, I kind of cover up the best part of it. So I'm just going to lean surreptitiously this way.
Oh, and something else is that I would also like to give a shout out to paleontologist Dr. Ian Brown for 3D printing the skull too.
Oh, Ian.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh,
That looks so cool.
I have one more question. This is another question from our friend Inez. She's asking if they were alive today, Tyrannosaurs, what would be their ideal habitat?
Ideal habitat. So it probably would have been a more temperate lowland environment. So it probably would have been like a swampy area. They probably would have relied on dense vegetation for camouflage and also for ambushing their prey. As for the weather, I'm not entirely sure, but I know that some have found the areas that T-Rex and the dinosaurs lived in to be very hot and humid, like a swamp area.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
So I have another question for you, Evan. I know before we've talked about, how much, we're both big nerds. Outside of paleontology, is there like something you wish you could do that's somehow related to paleo, where you can combine everything that you love?
I think. So let's see. Well, I am currently working on a superhero story at the moment where I have a character that turns into and summons dinosaurs.
Fun.
It's kind of like a mix between like Ben 10 and Pokemon.
Oh, please explain.
Definitely. So let's see. So this is a superhero story, and in it, you basically have characters or people who have powers that are listed into 4 different groups. There are psychics, people who can manipulate stuff with their mind, elementals, people who can use elemental abilities, so think of it like effortless airbender, people who turn into animals, and finally moleculars, or people who can actually alter their body's physique or chemical composition. But there is one group called fifth category where it's basically something unrelated. And so I have a character who turns into some dinosaurs that use elemental attacks. So basically, if you would picture a T-Rex that has like a little Godzilla spikes running down its body, but they're on fire, and also has like a little crown crest on its head.
That's cool.
I'm absolutely into this.
I know. Yeah, like you're gonna have to show it to us when you complete it.
Definitely, but it's kind of been like a good mix between like fantasy, but also science fiction too. Or
Like.
Oh, that's right up our alley. We love finding ways that you can combine, art, science fiction, and still add the science stories to it. So I think, once you get this all set up and done, we'd love to see it and share about it more on the show.
Definitely.
If that's okay with you.
Yeah, I definitely like it when there's like a lot of different different media that use science involved. So like say in My Hero Academia, you have like Gabe, how caught up are you with My Hero Academia?
Nope, spoilers.
No spoilers. Yeah, I'm finishing season 4 right now. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because the thing is that like you have characters such as Well, one thing I'll probably say about My Hero Academia is actually more like how realistic the injuries are presented. So, in one scene where you have Deku who uses, it was one for all, right? It's one for all. He has to be careful of how he uses it because it basically results in him damaging the muscle tendons in his body. And they go into a lot of scientific detail on the different tendons that are in action.
Cool. So we do have another question from one of our viewers. This is actually from Dr. McDonald, who was on our show earlier today in our Animal Crossing episode. First, he says, excellent stuff. Are you going to look at skull stress in juveniles versus adults in any other tyrannosaurs like Gorgosaurus?
That's a good question. So we do have Jane and a couple of adult T-Rex specimens, but it would be probably a good idea to take a look at Gorgosaurus. Not to mention, there's also Eutyrons too. So basically, if it's complete and there's enough different skull material at various ages, then yes, that would be perfect.
I love that's such great research. I can't wait to see where you go with this next.
Yeah, good luck in the continuation of your master's degree.
Thanks.
So after your masters, what's next for you, Evan? Where do you want to see yourself go as a paleontologist?
So afterward, I am going to be going through the PhD, but I'm still looking at different programs.
Still want to research Tyrannosaurs in particular?
Tyrannosaurs, yes, because in addition to skull morphology, I'll also be taking a look at neck mechanics. So taking a look at how necks played in a role of feeding of Tyrannosaurs.
Cool. Awesome. Well, that looks like all the questions that we've had in our chat. So, Evan, I just want to say thank you for sharing your research with us. That was incredibly informative and really enjoyable.
Thanks.
All right, so everybody, sorry, I just realized from this angle it looks like Dynamotera is about to bite my shoulder. Very dangerous position here. Thank you everybody for joining us for today's Fossil Friday web chats. We'll be back next week. And as always, if you want to support either of our museums as we continue being closed and as we continue bringing programs online, there will be information on how to do that after the show. So thank you for watching, and we will see you all next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey guys. Take care.
Bye, Evan.